The right habits put you in control of your health, relationships, mindset, and more. But most people lack the tools to stick with those habits long enough to see results. That is about to change. Welcome to the Unshakable Habits Podcast with your host, habit change specialist and speaker, Stephen Box. Join us each week as experts share their stories, experiences, and insights, and give you the tools to build unshakable habits so you can live life on your terms. It's time to take your habits from unsustainable to unshakable.
Hey, welcome everybody to the Unshakable Habits Podcast. I am your host, Stephen Box, and today I am joined by Kawan Karadaghi. Kawan, thanks for joining me today, man.
Stephen, thanks for having me on. Love the title and the message.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for being here. So you have a very interesting story. You went from a guy who was partying and by your own admission, pretty lazy, hated working out, things like that, to now all of a sudden you're a guy who co-owns several gyms and you have your own podcast talking to people about habits. So we're going to dive into how that kind of transformation actually happens. But before we do, we want to remind the audience of our unshakable framework, because that is how they're going to take your story today and be able to apply it back to their own lives. So phase one, or part one of the framework, is that you have to have a vision. Now, a lot of people, they set goals. And the reason why I'm not a big fan of goals is because goals are usually tied to an outcome. And Kawan, you know this. Most of the time, we don't have a lot of control over the outcomes, right?
Right.
So a vision allows us to think about the person we want to be. What kind of behaviors does that person have? What is their mindset? What is their attitude? What kind of thoughts go through their heads? And those are the things we can control. The way we control those is the second part of the framework. We have to develop or better utilize certain skills. And of course, in order to attain or better utilize the skills that we have to take the third part, which is to have repeatable or daily actions that build those skills up. So as we go through your story today, we'll be looking for those three aspects. Mm-hmm. Sound good to you, man?
That sounds awesome.
Cool. So take me back to Kawan, who was out there partying and hated working out. What was life like for you then?
See, that's a great question. Growing up, I didn't really, there was no inclination for any type of, improvement or working out or exercise was the last thing on my mind. I sought out thrill in basically, escaping or being in this little mini adventures that would live for the weekends. And that's kind of who I was, and that's, it was funny because when I did it, I still wasn't happy doing it. And I remember feeling, a lot of pain from doing that, from not, doing the things that I wanted to do, because I knew that there was something that I was pulled towards doing better in my life. And pain has a funny thing, a way of making you stop and think. And I think that's one of the things that led me to more of a growth phase was listening to that. So just very directionless, very aimless, lazy, and didn't really have much going for myself outside of my family and friends that believed in me. So, I just was that guy, I partied and that's kind of all I wanted to do. And I realized at some point that I had to change some of those things so that I could actually, not be a failure.
So you said something there that I think a lot of people can relate to. You lived for the weekend. And that's something that I think so many people, especially when we're talking about health, that it's a repeatable thing where during the week, a lot of us actually do pretty well. We move quite a bit, we eat better. I mean, obviously not everybody, but I think a lot of people can relate to that. But then on the weekend, man, the wheels just fall off, right?
Right.
So kind of take us into what the mindset is with that. When you were going through that, what was that experience like for you? Why was the weekend so important to you?
I think it gave me the opportunity to basically become someone else, escape kind of what I was or who I was. Obviously being a social creature by nature, it gave me the opportunity to met or, build relationships with others and sort of, go on little mini adventures during the weekend there and experience life out of the monotony of everything. So that's kind of what that was. And, weekends weren't the only time that I did that. It was during the week as well. And it's just something that I enjoyed doing because it allowed me to, on a physiological or psychological level, it was more, chasing those things that make you feel good, right? Getting the dopamine, getting some of that good stuff flowing there by going out and having fun. So I changed my value system into the things that I thought were important. I realized that those things were something that I was chasing that just didn't have an end. There was never going to stop.
Yeah.
Those things that you want out there that you think bring you joy are short term. And
Yeah.
that's the important thing that I realized was that it was just a never ending tunnel that I would never see the end of. And you have to ask yourself at the end of that is what do you want at the end of that? What are you willing to part with?
One thing that you mentioned there was, or when you were first telling your story, was how you kind of felt like a failure. And part of this, going out and partying and trying to be this different person, as you said, was trying to get away from that failure to be somebody else. Was there a moment that you kind of had that reflective time of realizing that your life wasn't where you wanted it to be, that you felt like a failure?
Oh yeah, all the time. There was times where, there was just a lot of different emotions that I felt towards being, frustrated, angry with myself, disappointed, and suffering through some mild depressive states every once in a while. And it's a lot to think on, for those listening. But those were things that they were so hard to see past because it becomes a part of you. And it sort of overtakes who you are, and that's what you think your identity is. So it's important to look outside of that and say, that's not who I am. These are things that I'm doing to myself, and I have the ability to sort of change these things if I don't like them. And that's something that it took me a while to get to. But taking ownership of that was the first sort of glimmer of light to see myself outside of this of this box, right? Was to say that it's up to me, if it's up to be, it's up to me to do these things. So I felt it all the time. And I just knew because I wasn't acting in accordance to who I either was or wanted to become. And that's the important thing you have to pay attention to. A lot of people shy away from that. And those are all signals, it's just life or the universe trying to tell you something.
Yeah, I love that, man, because you kind of hit the nail on the head there. A lot of us do have these, it's almost like two people inside of us, right? Where there's the person who wants to go out, they want to have fun, they want to do all these things. But at the same time, there's that other part of you that you can kind of hear knocking on the door a little bit, going, "Hey, I want to come out. I want to be successful. I want to do things. I want to help people. I want to grow. I want to do all this stuff in life." And you're keeping me from doing it with all this other stuff you're doing, right?
Right.
So I think this kind of gets into a little bit of your vision and where you started to form this vision at, because you already had this internal sense of the person you wanted to become. So your vision sounds like it maybe was a little bit naturally in you. You could already kind of feel it. Was there a particular instance, maybe a particular person or a certain circumstance that really was that wake up moment for you to help you to realize what this vision was?
Yeah, it's a great question. I had several, people or mentors that took an interest in me in the beginning, and I am who I am because of them, and obviously my own doing as well. But they had a big part in that. So there was Jacques Wilson was his name. He was one of the first guys, outside of my family who kind of saw something in me, a little gift of, some entertainment in there. And that's when I originally pursued a career in acting, which obviously didn't pan out. You've seen me in the big screen there, but so that led me to more of finding myself out a little more and exploring what that identity was. Then I met a wonderful guy who took an interest in me outside in acting classes, and we decided to move to the West Coast as friends there to see kind of what that was like. And those two guys were highly influential and helped me find kind of what those next steps look like, right? And that vision started from there when I started going for a run one day that just floored me, right? It was one of the toughest things that I've ever done, and I felt so much pain from it because I just wasn't in shape at all. And I'm sure you probably relate to that. A lot of people relate to that haven't worked out before. That you do something and you say, "Man, I never want to do that again," because you just aren't good at it. You don't feel great about yourself. So those were kind of the first couple steps. And then when I started getting real serious about it, that's when I kind of saw what that vision looked like. I had always had small visions when I was younger of, becoming stronger, becoming a little bit better at my life and the things that I was doing. I was fascinated by martial arts and just becoming this better version of oneself, which I think is everyone's story in life. Is we're always striving to be someone better. And for me, that's kind of what stuck there. And that was where the iterations of, or the beginnings of it. And then that's when I kind of had a vision of just having just higher standards and wanting to become someone worth becoming in that realm of fitness. So I kind of saw the body and physique that I wanted. There was a lot of that was involved. So seeing that helps because it makes it tangible. So my message there for everyone is literally have someone that you want to look like. As funny as that sounds, because that gives you in your mind a target, a goal, something in your head that you want to see. It doesn't have to be necessarily a goal that you want to get to, but it's like a painting that you visualize constantly. And when I looked in the mirror and I didn't see what I wanted to see, it drove me further into acquiring it. And then I asked myself, what does that person do to become who he is or to maintain who he is? And I said, well, that person does this, that person does these things right. And that's what you have to do. You have to do the things that successful person is doing in your mind, right? In your life. And having that vision for me is what helped. I put somebody in my mind that I wanted to be and look like. And I strove to look like that. It was just as simple as that. I visualized it. And it was something that I saw in my mind. And that's what I strove to go for every day.
Yeah, I love the the fact that you really kind of hit on a couple of things there. So one is you had to take a step, right? And I think sometimes we get so caught up in, is it the right step? You said yourself, your very first step was trying to get into acting, and you weren't successful with that. But yet here you are today, successful. So your first step was not necessarily the right first step in terms of where you're going to end up at anyways. But what people have to think about here is, and I've seen this story play out over and over again. You take a step, whether it's the right direction or not, a lot of times it leads you to where you need to be. It's almost as if everything kind of conspires together to start working in your favor when you just take action. Because had you not taken that step, you probably don't meet those two mentors in your life, right? Because you met them by taking that first step. If you don't meet them, then you don't take some of the next steps. So it's funny how sometimes the things that we think we should be doing aren't what's going to actually lead us to success. Sometimes it's just taking a leap of faith, so to speak, and seeing what happens. So, depending on what someone's belief system is here, will kind of dictate how they believe that happens. But regardless of what your belief system is, I think we can all agree that when we take action, life rewards us.
That's right. And on the other side of that is beautiful possibilities. And I think a lot of it is, sometimes being, comfortable with where you are and not wanting to change that. And that's a scary thing, because why would you, right? There's nothing wrong. Everything's okay. You're living life, right? It's about wondering and realizing the possibilities. I painted myself a masterpiece picture in my mind of what that would look like. And in attaining that, I saw nothing but good coming from it. So I said, why not do this? And that's kind of what led me to it. It was leading into it. And you're absolutely right. It's taking those first couple of steps and going forward. And it might not be the right step, and that's all right. You'll learn from that experience too.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how you find your vehicle, if you will, how you find the little instrument in you there.
Yeah. So if someone's out there listening to this and they've been sitting on the fence, they know they need to do something, they don't know what to do, they're scared to take the first step, just take it. You'll get where you need to go. Don't even worry about if it's the right step right now.
That's right. And exactly.
So you also touched on this idea that you started looking at other people and you said, you know what? I want to have a physique like that. I want to have that kind of body. And I want to point out, because I think if people just hear that part, they might kind of get caught up on this idea about comparing themselves to other people, and I have to try to look a certain way. So first of all, I'm going to point out that you did not at any point specify that it had to be a certain body type, right? So,
right.
Make sure that people understand that you're not saying that you have to necessarily go look like Bruce Lee or you have to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger or whatever, right? It's look like the person you want to look like. And then the other thing that you pointed out there was, and this to me was the really powerful part, is not just did you have something you can model after to try to work toward, but you also had that moment of acknowledgement of, you know what? If I want to look like that, I have to figure out what behaviors get me there. I have to actually figure out what those are. And that became a part of your vision.
That's exactly right. It was and to touch on the previous topic too, is lean into the things that pull or excite you and you find some sort of intrigue in it, so that you're taking the right steps towards that. And that reveals your personality later on. The vision there, exactly. I saw someone that I wanted to look like, or in my mind, I was like, okay, I told myself, you're not exactly going to be like, because there was a reality to it,
Yeah.
and the beautiful part, or the reality to it as well, is your muscles are your muscles. You know what I mean? You can shape and create them, and your body is your body. It'll become what you create from it, because that's who you are and that's what you've been given. So it's very important not to compare yourself to what others are, because that takes away your uniqueness. That takes away what you have the potential to build. Always, always remember that. It's easy to look at people and say, well, I don't look like that. And my message there is all the better, because then you can look your best for who you are, right? So when I looked at people there, or the people that I wanted to emulate, I basically, I put myself in my mind. I said, okay, if that's the successful version of Kawan in this field, what does successful Kawan do? What does this person do that keeps him there, or that he does? And then my mind went racing, because it was like, oh, he does this. He probably sleeps at this time, and your imagination can run wild with it.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. So I kind of figured out. I wrote down some of those things that were there, that were truths. And I said, this is what this person does in order to be successful, right?
Yeah.
And I said, well, then that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And I just repeated those things. Now, the important part of finding that, what I did innately that I had no idea I was doing, was finding the 80-20 rule of that. What's that important, those important things, those two activities that will get you there the most effective way. And for me, it was like ingrained in my mind that protein intake was super important to build muscle, right? Obviously, you lost so much weight. You probably heard that in your sleep. You probably recite that in your sleep. And yeah, there's some truth to it with science and everything changing now. But then I said, okay, you have to do that. You have to eat the right amount of protein to grow muscle. That's number one. Number two, successful Kawan doesn't skip gym workouts. That doesn't happen. If there's something on the schedule and you want to become this person, you better put some work in, because right now in this beginning phase, you have a lot of catching up to do, and you got a lot of equity to put in. You got to put that work in to get that credibility right now. There's no time to mess around. So I had to put in a little bit of overtime, because I was in my late 20s. And I said, and there's never a wrong time, just for those listening, but I realized kind of all the time that I had wasted, if that makes sense. And that's when I was like, all right, I owe this to myself to put a little more overtime in to catch up. And that's just what I did, man. I repeated those things, as simple as it sounds, until I effectively reached my goal. I re-strategized along the way, by reassessing where I was with my strength, with the way I looked, and I just constantly course corrected until I got there.
Yeah, you mentioned that there is no such thing as too late. I mean, I'll tell people I was almost in my mid-30s before I had my 80-pound weight loss. I've had clients, and I'm sure you have as well, who were in their 40s, their 50s, their 60s. So it's not a matter of how much time have you wasted. It's just a matter of, hey, wherever you are in life, it's time to stop wasting time.
That's right, man. You nailed it. I was on the bus in LA, and I didn't have a car. I walked and biked everywhere I went, which helped, because I got more in shape, I guess. But I was on a bus, man. I was 26, 27 years old. And I remember thinking to myself, well, it's too late. You're not going to be a professional bodybuilder. So you may as well stop working out, because it's not really going to go anywhere. And I thought, wow, that's, I may not be a professional bodybuilder. Yeah, that's true. But time's going to go on. So I may as well do something with that time, right? The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. And the next best time is today, as the saying goes.
Yeah, I love that, because it goes back to what we were saying earlier about goal setting versus having a vision. If you had just set a goal to become a professional bodybuilder, you might have been more prone to just give up, because you would have been like, this isn't going to happen. 6 months into your training, you're not super ripped or your muscles aren't huge, like you're not stage ready, you're like, this isn't going to happen. But because your vision was for more than that, because you wanted to be healthy, because you wanted to be successful, and you saw being healthy as part of being successful, you were able to stick with it.
That's right, man. I think that bodybuilder analogy with the goal is 100% spot on. We try to attain a level of status with it. And I think that's where you get kind of messed up along the way. You got to do it for other reasons, which are important to you. And that's what it was for me. You just got to have your heart in it. Yeah. You got to have something in you or part of you that wants it. And because of whatever that is for you, for me, it was not doing things halfway anymore, and making this commitment to myself because I owed it to myself. And it was something that I wanted to master. I committed to that level. I said, I want to get great at this, and I want to be this person. And that's what it was.
So let's talk about the second part of the framework here, because we've talked quite a bit about your vision. So let's talk about some of the skills. A lot of people, especially when it comes to health and fitness, this is what they imagine. I'm going to wake up one day at 5 o'clock. I right now I get out of bed at 8, 9 o'clock, but say I'm going to get out of bed at like 5 o'clock in the morning, right? I'm going to fix this super healthy, nutritious breakfast. I'm going to go for a 5-mile run. I'm going to, then I'm going to come back. I'm going to down a protein shake. Then I'm going to, fix my prepared salad or whatever for lunch. And I'm going to go and have that. And then after work, I'm going to go hit the gym for 2 hours, and I'm going to be in bed by 7 p.m. Right? Like that's what people imagine life is going to be like. I mean, that's how it was for you, right? I mean, that's absolutely probably the way that it happened for you, right? Not at all.
No, yeah, no, not at all. No, I basically, I had the complete opposite of that, and that's not to say that didn't happen. And it usually happens, by the way, on January 1st, every year. So, and that's not to knock a resolution, but, listen, I'll say this time and time again, every day is a resolution. You have the opportunity every morning in the next 5 minutes to make that change. It's really in the next 5 minutes. That's it. And it's, you'll hear this a lot in different circles, but it's really the little things. There's no, it's not the grandiose or the big gigantic goal or these standards and rules that you have for yourself and the way you think things got to be. It just doesn't work that way. You're a new habit or any type of thing that you want to bring on takes time, and you got to be patient with it. But the one thing you need to do is to constantly put in the small efforts daily. And there's nothing more important than that. It can be the smallest thing out there, but those little things add up. And I mean that. It's the little changes that add to the big changes later on, to the big, results later on. So, I always told personal training clients, friends, family members nowadays is to always go small in your expectations of what you have for yourself. And that sounds like, that's not really ambitious. What do you mean by that? It means you have great ambitions, but you need to have small expectations and realities or action steps to get to that. And it's the little step by step that gets you to the top of that mountain there. You can't jump to the top. It doesn't work that way. You gotta do something sustainable that you're going to stick with and be able to do it daily. And a lot of that depends on your environment. A lot of that depends on, the people you're around, but break it down to its smallest doable component. And stick with that until you develop that at a good stage of 1 week to 4 weeks. and then look at increasing that week over week. That's the key. And you gotta simplify it to its smallest achievable thing. And then you feel that as though it's doable.
Yeah, I like the fact that you pointed this out because you use the analogy too of this idea of you're kind of climbing a mountain, reaching a certain peak, right? And I like to use this analogy of imagine you're going to go and climb Everest. Well, you're not Superman. You're not going to leap to the top of the mountain in a single bound, right? So if you're going to go climb Everest, you can't just go to, your local sporting goods store and buy a heavy jacket and show up one day and climb the mountain, right? It takes a lot of planning, a lot of execution. You have to go buy all the right equipment. You have to have a plan. You have to have your supplies. You have to have all these things. And then you start, and then along the way, there are places that people stop. There's a path that other people have already kind of carved out to say, look, here's how you get there. And that's not even to speak of the physical commitment of getting in shape to even be able to handle that climb, right? So it's not just this simple thing. It's little tiny steps, right? Because if you don't sit down and plan what equipment you're going to need, if you don't take out the time to go to the store and buy the equipment, if you don't pack the equipment in your bag, if you don't take those little tiny steps that seem insignificant in the grand scheme of things, you never even get to the point that you can start climbing the mountain.
Oh yeah. And when I say small, I mean, so small that it just becomes like, a little bit laughable.
Yeah.
For me, it was, I had every excuse in the book, well, I got to walk into the closet and get the shoes out from, the closet. It's just, that's how am I, that's too hard to do. And so I said, all right, well, why don't you walk into the room first? Let's do that. And then I did that. And then it was like, okay, can you look at the closet? I can look. Okay. All right. I don't want to look at it again. Okay. That's all right. Let's grab, let's take one step forward and then see, we'll come back tomorrow, or maybe, oh, well, I guess I could do that. And just, just play around with that. And then, I would put the shoes by the door so that I can see them now. And now it was easier now because they were right there. And then now it was about putting them on. Right. So, well, I can't, I got so much stuff to do. I can't work out for 2 hours or 1 hour. I was like, why does it got to be an hour? Why don't you just do 10 minutes or 5 minutes? And I was like, you know what, that's doable. And that's what I did. And I eased into that. And I just repeated that until it just stuck with me. And then that's what I gradually increased it, because it becomes habitual, it becomes part of your life at that point. And that's the important thing to remember there. And then also, learning in the process of it, understanding that other people go through this too. You're not the only one. And having, an accountability partner. I always say, and I always recommend to everybody is get a friend or just hire a trainer and just, a personal trainer or coach, and anything you do, it will help you tremendously, and you'll bypass years and years of pain, of trial and error, and you'll just fast track through it.
Yeah, I mean, having that mentor or that friend or that expert who can help you is so valuable. It helps you stay on track. It helps you save time. And I think a lot of people, they are hesitant to do that because they have this mentality of, I know what I should do, right? But I'm just not doing it. Well, the doing it is the important part, because a lot of us know what to do. Most of the time when you hire a coach, you're not really hiring a coach to tell you what to do. You're hiring a coach to help you learn how to do it and how to do it properly.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And there's so many great things that come with it. It's the appointment time, the accountability, and a friend or a workout partner can help. The only issue is sometimes they either move or, something happens or they stop. So, social, proofing it is a great way to do it, and that's with a friend or a trainer. But if you're out there alone, and it's not a big deal. I had that too, and I had a friend I worked out with. When he moved back, I was on my own, and by that time I had the habit built down. It was already ingrained, and I was doing it. So do that in the beginning until it becomes that part of your behavior, and then you can eventually go on your own and do it. But learning that is the most important thing along the way, is saying how can I do that, and never stop learning through it. That's the most important thing. It's a continuous learning process, and the more and more you educate yourself in the beginning, the more that'll pay off. A funny thing I did is all I did was read Men's Health magazine, Stephen, and till this day I still read them. They provide me with things and knowledge and insight and education that pays off. And that's what you want to do. Just get educated for yourself to learn what's going on behind the scenes there with it.
Yeah. One thing that you talked about in that story with the shoes that I think people really need to make sure that they heard is this idea that in your head, you're having these conversations. And it was, well, why are you even bothering? You can't work out for an hour. You can't work out for 2 hours. You're not going to get any results from 5 minutes, right? Those are the conversations that were going on in your head. And you had to change that language. You had to change those thoughts and be like, but if I do 5 minutes, I'm starting to build my character. I'm starting to build that person that I set that vision for, that person who does work out. If I do 5 minutes today and I do 5 minutes tomorrow and I do 6 minutes on Wednesday, kind of thing, then eventually I will be the person who does have time to work out for an hour because it becomes a priority. But you had that recognition that if you tried to start there, it was never going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. No, it was it wasn't not only never going to happen, it was unsustainable because your mind doesn't work that way. It doesn't see the value in it yet. The value proposition in your mind hasn't been switched. You don't see it because it's the payoff's not there yet, doesn't show up yet. That's one issue with that, is when you start in the beginning, you don't see the results right away, and you think, well, this isn't working. I'm out of here. And that's the furthest from the truth, because it is, but you're just not seeing it yet until that momentum becomes your best friend. But it has to be sustainable. It has to be something you can always do, which is the most important thing. And realizing the benefit of the long-term gain, right? So for me, I always told myself, well, you're going to feel better after. And that's the carrot that I dangled. I told myself I was going to feel better. And I said, well, I like that. And you're going to look better, right? And you can say you worked out today. So I validated it in those senses. I knew the way my ego, my mind worked. And I used those tools to essentially work with it in achieving it. So because it was like, for me, with the importance of, first of all, I said that I was going to do it. Second of all, I'm going to look and feel better. Third of all, it's nothing but benefits. So I changed the value proposition in my mind to see it as doing it was going to be a little more beneficial than not. Because of those things. And that helped me kind of realize that. And that's what led me to say, okay, well, once I got to that 5 minute or 10 minute mark, I said, man, this feels great. I'm going to do 20, or I'm going to do 30 minutes, because I was already there. I had gotten in, and then it was up to me at that point. It gives you that sense of freedom to do more. So you just want to start, so that way you have the possibility to go longer if you want. It's up to you.
Yeah, I love that, man. I think that's really great message that you're driving home there. One thing that I want to kind of quickly discuss here is those skills, kind of going back to that, because we haven't really uncovered what those were just yet. So you talked about how you realized certain things like the protein that you needed to do. Those were your focuses. But there are skills involved in this. And I think a lot of times where we may get ourselves into trouble is just assuming that if we take some action, that everything's going to work out. And yes, we want you to start taking action. We want you just to do something, anything as a way to get your mindset going. But ultimately, you got to start developing the right skills because we both know people who have done something for years and they still don't have results because they're not doing the right things. So talk to us about Kawan. What skills did you need to develop in order to start living this healthy lifestyle?
So a lot of the skills that I had to understand and develop in that span before becoming a personal trainer was really taking on an apprenticeship of learning, right? So a lot of intake of information from reputable sources is what I went to. So I gathered information from reputable magazines, articles online, and influential people in the gym, or people that had kind of efficacy or reputation or credibility in doing it. So that way, I had always that learner mentality. I was always hungry for knowledge and learning, and then gathering that information, and by and large looking at all of it and saying, okay, if this many people say it's true, it's true. So that was the first step. The second kind of step was the work ethic. That was something that had to be there. You have to commit to that, to say, I got to work at this, and there's nothing that can replace that. You got to be able to put the time in once you're at that level of commitment, to say, I'm gonna work hard at this goal, or whatever that is that you have for that day, and being conscientious of that, and saying, you can want the physique of your life and desire it as much as you want, but you can't bypass the work part. And sometimes hard work doesn't guarantee that you'll get there, but it's a necessary component. So in conjunction with that, being a learner, learning your work ethic, having work ethic, is having also systems in place, and that could be little things like having, your workout clothes laid out on the floor for the night before. That way you wake up, it's right there. You just got to get changed. All your meals made so that there was no chance of not eating properly. I had a stopwatch, and I was a hard gainer, so I had to eat every 2 hours or every 3 hours in order to put on size, which a lot of people don't do, and they wonder, why they don't put on, that size or muscle or whatever. Even if it's weight loss, you gotta eat right and work out right. So having systems in place so that there was no margin for error to fail. So my stopwatch, every time I finished eating, I would hit it, and then in 2 hours, or I would look at it constantly to remind myself that it was time to eat again. And that way, there was just no way to miss it. I knew what time it was. I knew I had to eat, and I had the meal ready. The fourth thing is, discipline. You got to have a level of that to be able to embody these other ones. You got to tell yourself, look, there was days I worked at restaurants, 6, 8, 10-hour shifts, 6 days a week. And you were on your feet constantly. There were barely any breaks. And I was super tired, right? But I couldn't skip the workout because that would be a day that was gone. Now, if there was times I was too fatigued, then yeah, I would listen to my body so I didn't get injured. There's a fine line there. But having the discipline and telling yourself, I don't want to do it. It's not going to be fun. But I'm just going to get in and do something rather than nothing. And that way I'll feel better, and, I'll get closer to where I want to be. And those 4 kind of are things that were repeatable. The fifth one I will say is one of the most important. you got to do things that are fun too. It can't just be, well, it's got to be this rigid thing and it's got to be this way. If you're not feeling something that particular day, it's okay to not do it. Do something that's similar, or that it will get you a similar result, or something that's, like-minded in that approach, and do that. And have fun with it. Because if it's not, you're not gonna stick with it. So make it fun at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So just to kind of, because you actually gave us both the skills and some of the actions there all at once. So I want to separate it out a little bit for people. So some of the skills that you developed were you had to actually develop your discipline, right? You had to develop things like meal prep, and you had to develop the skills of knowing what foods to eat. You had to develop knowledge of exercise and how to actually do the exercises. You had to develop the skill of knowing how to listen to your body, to be able to figure out the difference between, am I just being lazy, or am I actually really going to potentially hurt myself if I go do too much? What days do I skip the gym versus which days do I maybe just dial back my workout? Those are all skills that you had to develop over time. You didn't have to have them perfect when you started. You just had to develop them. And then how did you develop those skills? Well, you know, one of the skills you had to develop was eating frequently in order to put on some weight. And so you took on that daily action of setting that timer so you always knew when you had to eat. I'm sure one of your actions was you probably had certain times or certain days that you made sure you had food ready, because realistically speaking, you're not eating every 2 to 3 hours if you have to cook every meal right before you eat it, right? There's some meal prep that probably has to go into that.
That's right.
So you took those actions of going to the gym every day, of setting that timer, of learning, reading those magazines, learning the exercises, gathering information. Those are the actions that you took in order to develop those skills.
That's right. Having those that ability to go and take the necessary steps to developing them. A lot of it was trial and error. I had to learn and relearn and unlearn things, and that's why having someone that knows what they're doing and truly just listening to what he or she has to say will save you a lot of that. So I always tell my clients, I went through everything, so you don't have to. And I had a lot of injuries that I had to learn from and course correct along the way, but that helped all of my clients because I knew how to help them avoid any of those pain points that were coming up. I could foresee them.
Yeah, it's funny. I tell clients all the time that, if I'm being completely honest, we're both guessing on a lot of this stuff. It's trial and error, even for the coach. The difference is I have a lot of past failures. I have a lot of mistakes that I've made, a lot of things that have worked for me over the years that I've discovered, and things that I've been able to help other people with that I can draw upon. So I'm making educated guesses. You're just making guesses, right? So that's the difference when you're working with someone who has that experience, is they don't necessarily have all the answers up front, but they do have a system in place. They do have something that helps guide their decisions to actually save you all that time.
That's right. And because of that expertise and just experience, right? So that's exactly it.
Well, Quan, I really appreciate you coming on today, man, sharing your story with us, talking to us about how that vision came to be for you, the skills that you developed along the way, and some of those actions that you take. And I think you really gave people, especially on the mindset piece, a lot of things that they can use today to go home. I've actually used the example before of, if someone doesn't like working out, just start with small stuff like have your shoes sitting there to look at, put your shoes on, maybe get in the car and drive to the gym. Don't even go inside, just sit in the parking lot, right? Just whatever it takes to build yourself up. So the fact that you came out and shared that that's exactly what you did with the shoes, that you're like, you know what? I don't want to go in the closet, so I'm just going to avoid the closet by taking the shoes out of it, right? And I'm just going to have them there. I'm just going to eliminate the obstacle. So the fact you shared that story, I love, because it really helps people to see, yes, these things, when you say them, they sound silly, they sound insignificant, but if you do them over time, you really will be successful.
That's right. And nothing could be more true than that. It's just the adding daily of that compounds and leads to that big change at the end there. It's just a daily, accumulated interest that leads to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And from now on, when I tell the story, I can be like, and if you don't believe me, go listen to my interview with Kawan. He'll even tell you.
Oh yeah, I could talk about this all day. So I love the conversation, man.
Well, man, before we wrap up, tell us just a little bit about what you do now. I know you're a personal trainer. You also co-own 3 gyms. So tell us a little bit about that, and then also tell us about ValueVerse.
Yeah, thanks, man. So basically, starting off as a personal trainer, I reached, master trainer level, which was just a lot of hours that you had to put in. And going to co-own the gyms there, we started off with 1. So Anytime Fitness is the gym franchise, and my business partners and I co-own 3 of them, and currently expanding to 4 and 5. It's really about just a tight knit community and building goals and results in the gym, and having that personable feel to it. So, check it out, and definitely, it's a welcoming environment. So that's kind of what we're up to now. And it's being in the world of business, it's always changing, and it's a wonderful thing to be a part of, to see people grow and pass on the thing that we all experienced as fitness people there. The ValueVerse is the podcast that I'm on now, which value and verse just basically means beneficial words that you can hear. So it focuses on, storytelling and then struggles of life and work, and, going into providing takeaways from that and what people can learn. And it's all on all platforms. And you can also find me on Instagram at ValueVerse.
Awesome, man. Really appreciate you sharing that. One thing that I want to point out here to people real quick is everything we just talked about in terms of your health journey. We could take that exact same framework that we used, and we could do a whole nother episode just on the process that you went through to become an entrepreneur, all the things you've had to do to grow since then. And what people would see if we did that is there would be tremendous overlap. Maybe the skills are a little bit different, the actions are different, but in terms of the process, in terms of getting the mindset right, in terms of taking the small steps, developing the skills, all that is the exact same process that you used to get healthy is what you used to become a successful business owner.
That's so, remarkable that you kind of took it apart like that, because I never thought about it that way. But that's exactly it. It's that recipe, isn't it? It's the the algorithm of what you apply to it that sets things in motion. And it's true. There was a lot of overlap in being open-minded, being a learner, and learning another language of business, and working with teams. And which was what clients taught me, is working with individuals. And that's right. You can take those principles and translate them to other areas of your life. And you're absolutely, you nailed it. It's all there's a lot of overlap in it when I go back and think on that.
And just real quickly, you already told us how to find the podcast on Instagram. Someone wants to connect with you. What are their other options?
So yeah, you can come to me on the web there as well, which is www.thevalueverse.com. And I'm very active on Instagram, so that's probably the best place to get in touch with me. And you'll see all little snippets and things that are on there to help out and add value.
All right. Well, appreciate it again, man. Again, huge thanks to Kawan for joining us today and sharing his insights and his knowledge. This is Stephen Box reminding you that you are not designed to be average. So go out and become unshakable.
Thanks for listening to the Unshakable Habits Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest, please subscribe at unshakablehabits.com/YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. You can learn more about unshakable habits at unshakablehabits.com. Until next week, be unshakable, my friends.